that is a great change that have been for a long time being asked for a lot of old investors and new investors and people and airline companies from abroad are willing to come to Brazil, but those limits, those 20% limits, kept them away from Brazil for a long time. So now the government has finally issued this new regulation willing to claim those companies to come.
Let's talk now to Leonardo Palhares, attorney and partner at Almeida Corporate Law, about the change in law here in Brazil regarding the commercial airlines market. What happened?
Well, there's a new regulation in the beginning of this month, in March, that changed the limits of foreign participation in airline companies in Brazil. It used to be 20%, the maximum of foreign participation. Now it's 49%. So a international investor willing to invest in Brazilian airline companies or even to establish a Brazilian airline company can hold investments up to 49% of the voting capital. And that is a great change that have been for a long time being asked for a lot of old investors and new investors and people and airline companies from abroad are willing to come to Brazil, but those limits, those 20% limits, kept them away from Brazil for a long time. So now the government has finally issued this new regulation willing to claim those companies to come.
And what is our reality in this market that resulted in this change in law?
Okay, that's a good question, because Brazilian airlines they are facing a tough challenge with to overcome problems with they need new investments. The financial rates and dollar rates in Brazil and the gas prices and the operational costs of those companies require them to search for new investments. So Brazilian air companies in Brazil are right now searching for new investments, in need of new investments. And also we have four big groups of airline companies working in Brazil in commercial airlines right now. And there is a lot of space for new companies to come. So the main purpose of this regulation is either help and assist the companies that are already in place, but also invite and have this new regulation as an invitation for new companies to come.
And besides the airline companies, whom else has benefits with this change?
Oh, for sure, the consumers. Because as much companies the more we have companies in Brazil working in airlines, the more competition we'll have. And for sure, the bet that the government is right now investing in is to having more companies working on a Brazilian scale, to have more flights, to increase the offer, and then to have lower prices for the air tickets.
Do you think the services for the consumers can improve also?
Yes, it can. I would say in a second step, probably yes, because we'll have more companies working in Brazil and more ideas. And as a matter of competition, it's not only lower prices that will attract consumers, but also good ideas. So the more companies we'll have in Brazil, for sure, the more ideas and services and everything they will have to put in place to attract consumers. It will be harder for them to get consumers, and so that is the type of issue that will count a lot, I think.
In your opinion, can our airport structure in Brazil handle this demand, this growth?
That is one very, very good point, and one point that probably kept the government from issuing this regulation beforehand, because a few months ago, or a few years ago actually, Brazilian airport structure was very poor. We have a lot of need for new infrastructures, airports that were with very low structures and problems with technology and so on. But due to the recent world games in Brazil, such as the World Cup in 2014 and now 2016, the Olympics, the Summer Olympics, there's been a lot of investments in the airport infrastructure. And the main part of Brazilians' airports are right now ready to work on new capacities. They are working right now above the capacity they have. So they are pretty much ready to receive new flights and new air companies.
What about the business model in this market?
That's another bet of the government, actually, because one thing, Brazil is right now, they face the business model that airline companies in Brazil use right now. It's pretty standard. And the government, what they are trying to incite is to create new business models, such as, for example, low-cost airlines that can work in Brazil and having new services for lower costs. And that's a type of very use. We have a lot of companies like this in Europe, in the United States, or so on all over the world, but not that much in Brazil. The second business model, for example, that the government is trying to create with this new regulation is the regional flights, not only focusing on big cities of Brazil, but trying to create new airlines or new lines for connecting medium cities in Brazil, trying to use shorter flights in regional airports and to exploit those new regional airports.
Is the foreign capital anxious to come? Can this crisis interfere in this process?
Yes, I think it can interfere somehow, but in a good sense, I think. First, because we have a lot of airline companies willing to come to Brazil. That's a very large market that can be exploited. But as well, if you need to invest in Brazil, the Brazilian currency is right now undervalued considering the dollar. So it's cheaper to invest in Brazil. That could be a positive point for international airlines to come to Brazil, to create their subsidiaries in Brazil, and then operate inbound in Brazil.
And how Brazilian law offices can help in this process? Do you have clients willing to come?
That's the best question you made. But yes, for sure. For everything you do in terms of corporate law, you need an attorney to assist you in. So we have a large experience with air companies and infrastructure projects, and for sure we can assist. And it's important for a foreigner to better understand the Brazilian market, to better understand how the Brazilian legal system works, and then to be sure to invest. So it's very keen in this kind of business to search for a good advice.
And which kind of new players can come to Brazil?
Well, I would say airline companies for sure, but investment funds could be interested in capitalizing Brazilian companies we have right now. And eventually some other transportation companies that could focus on the airlines in Brazil.
Leonardo Palhares, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
Thank you. Luciane Miranda to São Paulo Direct by Dukascopy TV.